Ambassador Sarah Mitchell walked through the grand corridors of the Galactic Council station for what felt like the millionth time. Her shoes made soft clicking sounds against the crystalline floor that the Talarians had designed 300 years ago. Around her, dozens of alien species moved about their business, speaking in languages that her translator implant converted to smooth English in her mind. Sarah was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the deep exhaustion that came from years of being everyone's solution to everything. Today marked her 23rd year as humanity's chief ambassador, and in that time she had mediated 3,000 disputes between species who seemed incapable of solving their own problems. The current argument was particularly stupid. The Vrek and the Salthine were fighting over an asteroid that contained minerals neither of them actually needed. They had been shouting at each other for 4 hours now, and Sarah had spent every minute of it smiling patiently and suggesting compromises that both sides rejected immediately. "The asteroid has been in our territory for 2 centuries, the Vrek delegate hissed through his translator. He was a large creature, covered in blue scales that shimmered under the council chamber lights. "Your maps are wrong," the Salthine representative clicked back. She looked like a giant praying mantis, her multiple eyes fixed on her opponent with obvious hatred. Sarah took a slow breath and prepared to offer her 47th suggestion of the day. This was what humans did. This was what the galaxy expected from them. Patience. Understanding. Endless calm in the face of chaos. 47 years ago, humanity had joined the galactic community as the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel. The older species had expected humans to be like all the others, aggressive and territorial. Instead they found something unusual. Humans were patient. Humans could see multiple perspectives. Humans could sit through endless meetings and still find solutions that made everyone happy. At first it had been refreshing. Then it became useful. Now it was simply expected. Every territorial dispute, every trade disagreement, every cultural misunderstanding eventually ended up on a human diplomat's desk. The galaxy had learned that if you called the humans they would fix it. They always did. They never lost their temper. They never walked away. They never said no. Sarah had built her entire career on that reputation. She was good at her job. Really good. She could read alien body language, understand cultural context that most humans missed, and find common ground where none seemed to exist. But today, standing in front of 2 species arguing over rocks in space, she felt something crack inside her chest. "Perhaps," she began, her voice still calm and professional, "we could establish a rotating mining schedule where..." The chamber doors burst open with a pneumatic hiss. Admiral Thomas Blake strode in, his military uniform a sharp contrast to the flowing robes and natural forms of the alien delegates. His face was carved from stone, gray and hard and completely devoid of its usual warmth. Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. Thomas never interrupted council sessions. Never. Whatever had happened was serious. He crossed the chamber floor in quick, precise steps and climbed the stairs to her podium. The Vrek and Salthine had stopped arguing, watching this human breach of protocol with confused interest. Thomas leaned close to her ear. "The Kryn Dominion has taken hostages," he whispered, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Researchers from 7 different species. Medical personnel, scientists, educators. They grabbed them from a neutral station in the outer rim." Sarah felt her mouth go dry. "How many?" 214 total. He paused and his jaw muscles worked. 34 of them are ours. The galaxy swam around her for a moment. Sarah gripped the podium to steady herself. What do they want? Territorial concessions. Recognition of their expansion into the Helios sector. They are demanding the Council grant them sovereignty over 12 systems currently designated as neutral space. Thomas's voice dropped even lower. They have already executed the first hostage. A Talarian botanist named Kellier. They streamed it live across all channels to prove they are serious. Sarah's hands began to shake. She looked down at them, watching her fingers tremble against the smooth surface of the podium. In 23 years she had faced every kind of challenge. Species who hated each other. Trade wars. Religious conflicts. Cultural genocides narrowly avoided through careful words and patient negotiation. But this was different. This was not a dispute to mediate. This was not a problem to solve with compromises and understanding. This was violence against innocence. This was terrorism. "What does the Council suggest?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Thomas's expression went even harder. "They suggest negotiation. Careful diplomacy. They want to establish a committee to study the Kryn's grievances and determine if their territorial claims have historical merit. They estimate the process will take 6 to 8 months. 6 to 8 months. 214 hostages. The Kryn had already killed one to make their point. How many more would die while the council formed committees? Sarah looked out at the assembled delegates. Hundreds of species represented here from dozens of star systems. Every one of them had come to rely on human patience. Every one of them had learned that humans would absorb the insults, endure the difficulties and find peaceful solutions no matter what. The Vrek delegate was staring at her expectantly. So was the Salthine. They were waiting for her to tell them what to do, how to handle this crisis. The humans would figure it out. The humans always did. Something cold settled in Sarah's chest. It spread through her body like ice water in her veins, freezing the exhaustion, hardening the patience that had defined her entire career. Her hands stopped trembling. Her breathing steadied. Her mind became perfectly, absolutely clear. She had spent 23 years being patient. She had mediated 3,000 disputes. She had smiled through insults and absorbed aggression and found middle ground in impossible situations. She had done this because she believed in peace, in cooperation, in the possibility that different species could coexist without violence. But there were limits. There had always been limits. The galaxy had just never pushed hard enough to find them. Until now. Sarah straightened slowly, her posture changing in subtle ways that Thomas recognized immediately. He had served alongside humans in crisis situations before. He knew what happened when their legendary patience finally reached its end. "Admiral Blake," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent chamber. "Please prepare all human diplomatic vessels for immediate departure. I will be addressing the council shortly." Thomas nodded once, sharp and military. "Yes, Ambassador." He turned and left, moving even faster than he had arrived. Sarah looked down at the Vrek and Salthine delegates, still frozen in their argument about an asteroid nobody needed. "This session is concluded," she told them. "Resolve your dispute yourselves or don't. I no longer care." The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. Patience was not weakness. Patience was a choice. And every choice could be unmade. The Galactic Council chamber filled slowly over the next hour. Representatives from 47 species took their seats in the circular arena, murmuring to each other about the emergency session that Ambassador Sarah Mitchell had called. Emergency sessions were rare. The last one had been 12 years ago when the Rothani sun threatened to go supernova. Sarah stood at the central podium, watching the main display screen that dominated the chamber's north wall. Admiral Thomas Blake stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back in a rigid military posture. Neither of them spoke. They simply watched and waited. The screen flickered to life. The Kryn broadcast was coming through on all galactic channels, impossible to block or ignore. The image showed a stark metal room with harsh lighting. In the center, bound to a chair, sat a Talarian botanist. Kellier his name had been. Sarah had met him once at a xenobiology conference. He had been kind and gentle, passionate about plant life on frontier worlds. The Kryn executioner entered the frame. The broadcast cut off before showing the actual act, but everyone knew what had happened. The timestamp on the recording was 3 hours old. "Barbaric," muttered the Salthine delegate from her seat below. "Absolutely barbaric." "The council must respond with economic sanctions," suggested the Vrek representative. "Cut off all trade with the Kryn Dominion immediately." "We need a fact-finding committee," another voice called out, "to determine the root causes of Kryn aggression and address their legitimate grievances." Sarah listened to them debate, her expression completely neutral. Thomas shifted slightly beside her, a tiny movement that only someone who knew him well would recognize as tension. The screen flickered again. Another broadcast. Another hostage. This time the camera showed a young woman with dark skin and tired eyes. She wore the standard uniform of the Interspecies Medical Corps, the organization that provided healthcare to frontier colonies regardless of species. Her name appeared at the bottom of the screen in angular Kryn script, translated automatically by everyone's implants. Dr. Lisa Brown. Age 29. Human. Specialist in pediatric medicine. Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Lisa looked directly into the camera. "My name is Lisa Brown," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I'm a doctor. I have treated Kryn patients. I have saved Kryn children. Please, if anyone is watching, tell my parents that I love them." The Kryn executioner appeared again. This time the broadcast did not cut away. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in outrage, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Some species stood and demanded immediate action. Others called for calm and measured responses. The council speaker banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Sarah stood perfectly still. She watched the screen go dark. She counted her heartbeats, slow and steady. 1, 2, 3, 4. Something had broken inside her in the previous session, but now it had been replaced with something else. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. Thomas leaned toward her slightly. The rest of our people on that station have maybe 12 hours if the Kryn keep to their schedule, he said quietly. One execution every 6 hours. They are trying to prove they are serious. They have proven it, Sarah replied, her voice flat. The speaker finally managed to quiet the chamber. He was a Talarian, an elder of his species with pale green skin and enormous eyes that had seen centuries of galactic politics. The council recognizes Ambassador Mitchell, he announced. The floor is yours. Sarah descended from the podium and walked to the center of the chamber floor, where speakers traditionally stood when addressing the full council. The delegates settled into their seats, watching her with a mixture of sympathy and expectation. The humans would have a solution. The humans always did. Members of the council, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly in the vast space. For 47 years, humanity has been part of this galactic community. In that time we have served as mediators, diplomats and peacekeepers. We have resolved thousands of disputes. We have prevented dozens of wars. We have done this willingly, believing in the possibility of peaceful coexistence among all species. Nods of agreement rippled through the chamber. This was familiar ground. The humans were patient. Everyone knew this. We have been patient, Sarah continued, and something in her tone made several delegates sit up straighter. We have been understanding. We have absorbed insults, endured attacks, and found compromises when others refused to look for them. You have come to rely on our patience. To expect it. To assume it will always be there. The chamber had gone very quiet now. But patience is not weakness, Sarah said, and her voice dropped to something that made the translator implants struggle to find equivalent emotional weight in alien languages. Patience is a choice. We chose peace. We chose diplomacy. We chose to be the species that solves problems without violence. Every single day for 47 years we made that choice. She paused, letting the silence stretch. The Kryn Dominion has murdered 2 innocent people. They hold 212 others hostage, including 32 more humans. They have made demands that the Council cannot and should not meet. And I have listened to the suggestions from this chamber. Economic sanctions. Fact-finding committees. Diplomatic negotiations that will take months while people die every 6 hours. The Vrek delegate rose to his feet. Ambassador Mitchell, surely you must agree that hasty action would be. I am giving the Kryn Dominion 72 hours, Sarah interrupted, and her voice cut through the chamber like a blade. 72 hours to return every hostage alive and unharmed to neutral space. If they do not comply, humanity will retrieve our people. And anyone who gets in our way will regret it. The chamber exploded with noise. Delegates shouted over each other, some in support, most in shock. The Salthine representative's mandibles clicked rapidly in what her species displayed as extreme agitation. Ambassador Mitchell, the council speaker called out, humanity has 31 diplomatic vessels in service. The Kryn Dominion commands a fleet of 400 warships. You cannot possibly. 31 diplomatic vessels, Thomas Blake said from the podium, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm and professional, the voice of a military officer stating simple facts. That is correct, Council Speaker. Those are our diplomatic ships. He touched a control on the podium. The main display screen lit up with a star map of the local sector. Dozens of red icons appeared throughout the map, surrounding Kryn space from every direction. As of 6 minutes ago, Thomas continued, 600 human warships have emerged from dark space and are currently establishing blockade positions around the Kryn Dominion. Protocol Shepard is now active. The silence in the chamber was absolute. The Vrek delegate scales had gone pale. 600? But humanity does not have, you never mentioned. We did not mention many things, Sarah said softly. You assumed our 31 diplomatic ships were all we had because we never gave you reason to think otherwise. For 47 years, we have been your mediators and peacekeepers. We have also been watching, learning, and preparing for the day when someone pushed too far. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. Today is that day. The Kryn have 72 hours. After that, humanity will show you what we chose not to be. And none of you will ever forget it. Commander Vecthran of the Kryn Dominion stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Fong, and laughed at the human ultimatum. Around him, his officers joined in, their chittering sounds of amusement filling the command center. 72 hours, Vecthran repeated, shaking his head. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, making Kryn naturally strong and aggressive. They had conquered 12 systems through military might alone. The humans give us 72 hours or they will come take their people back. His tactical officer brought up the display showing human ship positions. 600 vessels formed a loose perimeter around Kryn's space, but they maintained distance, staying just outside weapons range. They are just sitting there, the tactical officer observed. Waiting. Of course they are waiting, Vecthran said. They are human. All they do is wait and talk and negotiate. They have no stomach for real war. The communications officer looked up from his station. Commander, we have received multiple messages from the Galactic Council. They urge us to release the hostages and avoid conflict. Send them another recording, Vecthran ordered. Execute the next hostage on schedule. Let the galaxy see that the Kryn Dominion does not bow to human demands. The order was carried out. 6 hours after Lisa Brown's execution, a Rothani engineer died in front of the cameras. Then 6 hours after that, a human teacher named Claire Watson. The Kryn broadcast each death across all channels, proving their resolve. The human ships did not move. They simply maintained their positions, silent and watching. 72 hours passed. Then 73. Then 74. You see, Vecthran told his bridge crew. Empty threats. The humans cannot even commit to their own ultimatum. They will negotiate. They always do. At hour 75 the human fleet moved. They did not charge forward in a mass attack as Kryn military doctrine would have predicted. Instead, they advanced slowly, methodically, tightening their perimeter with mathematical precision. Vecthran ordered his fleet to intercept them at the outer boundary of Kryn space. Prepare weapons, he commanded. Let us show these soft diplomats what real warriors look like. The first engagement occurred near the third planet of the Kryn home system. Vecthran's fleet outnumbered the human vessels 3-1 in that sector. Standard military strategy suggested the humans would either retreat or be destroyed within the hour. But nothing about the human attack was standard. The Kryn ships opened fire with plasma cannons, their primary weapons that had proven devastating against every enemy they had faced. The human ships' shields absorbed the first barrage, exactly as expected. What was not expected was what happened next. The human vessels did not return fire with their heaviest weapons. Instead, they advanced through the plasma fire and launched smaller, faster projectiles. Kinetic rounds. Simple metal slugs accelerated to tremendous speeds. Primitive weapons, Vecthran's tactical officer scoffed. Our shields will. The kinetic rounds punched through the Kryn shields as if they were not there. Not because the rounds were powerful enough to overwhelm the shields, but because the shields were designed to stop energy weapons. Matter moving at high velocity simply passed through. 3 Kryn ships took critical damage in the first 30 seconds. Vecthran ordered his ships to recalibrate their shields to stop kinetic projectiles. The adjustment took 4 minutes. In that time, the human ships switched to concentrated laser fire, targeting the now modified shield generators with pinpoint accuracy. They are adapting to our defenses, the tactical officer said, his voice losing its confident tone. Every time we change our configuration they change their attack. Vecthran snarled. Then we press the attack. All ships, full offensive. Overwhelmed them with firepower. The Kryn fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. For 20 minutes, space filled with energy fire and explosions. 2 human ships took heavy damage and began to fall back. Vecthran felt satisfaction surge through him. This was how war was fought. This was how victories were won. Then he noticed something strange. The damaged human ships were not fleeing the battlefield. They were pulling back just far enough to make repairs while other human vessels moved forward to take their place. And the ships that had been in reserve positions at the start of the battle were now rotating to the front lines. They are cycling their forces, his tactical officer said, studying the pattern with growing unease. Fresh ships coming forward, damaged ships falling back to repair. So what? Vecthran snapped. We have more ships. We will simply destroy them faster than they can rotate. But 6 hours later, Vecthran's confidence had begun to crack. His crews were exhausted. The Kryn fought in shifts too, but their ships required both shifts to be at battle stations during combat. The humans seemed to have enough crew to rotate positions without reducing combat effectiveness. More concerning was the human behavior. They did not break off to rest. They did not retreat to regroup. They simply kept coming, wave after wave, adjusting their tactics every few minutes based on Kryn responses. "Commander," his communications officer said, "we are receiving a transmission on all channels. It is from the human admiral." "Put it through," Vecthran ordered. Admiral Thomas Blake's face appeared on the screen. His expression was completely calm, showing no sign of stress or fatigue. Behind him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. "Commander Vecthran," Blake said, his voice steady and professional. "You have now had 75 hours to comply with our terms. You have chosen violence. Very well. I want you to understand what happens next. We will not stop. We will not tire. We will not forgive. Every human ship you damage will be repaired. Every human ship you destroy will be replaced. We will pursue your fleet until you have no ships left, or until you return our people. There is no third option." The transmission ended. Vecthran wanted to laugh it off as human bravado, but something in Blake's tone chilled him. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was the absolute certainty of someone stating a simple fact. 10 hours into the battle, Vecthran ordered his fleet to retreat to the inner system, where they could resupply and rest. The human fleet followed. Not quickly. Not aggressively. Just steadily, maintaining pressure, never allowing the Kryn forces to fully disengage. 12 hours. 14 hours. 16 hours. Vecthran's crew was falling asleep at their stations. The Kryn were strong and tough, but they were not evolved for endurance. Their bodies needed rest after prolonged exertion. His tactical officer had been awake for 20 hours straight and was making mistakes, misreading sensor data and giving incorrect target priorities. The human ships kept coming. At hour 18, one of Vecthran's captains made a critical error and exposed his ship's reactor core while attempting an evasive maneuver. The human vessels concentrated fire instantly and destroyed the ship. The captain had been awake for 22 hours. At hour 20, another Kryn ship collided with an asteroid while trying to navigate through a debris field. The pilot had dozed off for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was all it took. The ship survived but was crippled. At hour 24, Vecthran realized with growing horror that his fleet had traveled through 3 different star systems trying to break pursuit. The human ships were still there, still following, still attacking. They showed no signs of fatigue, no signs of wavering, because they were not getting tired. They rotated their crews every 8 hours. Fresh officers taking command. Fresh pilots. Fresh gunners. The humans worked in shifts like factory workers on an assembly line, each team well-rested and alert. The Kryn had evolved as ambush predators, evolved to strike fast and hard and overwhelm prey quickly. The humans were something else entirely. Something Vecthran had not understood until this moment. Humans were persistence hunters. On their homeworld, ancient humans had chased prey animals for days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They did not need to be faster. They just needed to never stop. And in space, with ships that could rotate crews, with tactics built around endurance rather than overwhelming force, that hunting strategy became terrifying. Vecthran looked at his exhausted bridge crew. Looked at the tactical display showing human ships still in perfect formation after 26 hours of continuous combat. Looked at his own fleet scattered and disorganized, ships limping along with tired crews making fatal mistakes. For the first time in his military career, Commander Vecthran felt fear. Captain Nina Foster crouched in the darkness of the Kryn military complex, her breathing steady and controlled despite 36 hours of continuous movement. Behind her, 12 members of her rescue team waited in perfect silence, their night vision equipment glowing faintly green in the shadows. They had been moving through hostile territory since the mission began, covering over 200 kilometers on foot through mountains, forests, and now this sprawling military base where the hostages were being held. Any normal military force would have stopped to rest, to sleep, to recover strength. But Nina's team had not stopped once. "Target building is 200 meters ahead," whispered Sergeant Kyle Park through the team's communication system. "Thermal imaging shows 73 heat signatures inside. 20 appear to be guards. The rest match the profile for our people." Nina checked her tactical display. Similar operations were happening simultaneously at 4 other locations across the Kryn homeworld. 500 human special forces operatives, all moving at the same time, all executing the same mission. Retrieve the hostages. Minimize Kryn casualties where possible. But complete the mission no matter what. The Kryn had made a fatal mistake 3 days ago. After humanity's deadline passed and the fleet engagement began, Commander Vecthran had ordered 3 more executions to prove Kryn resolve. A human engineer named Peter Cole. A Salthine medical student. A human administrator named Rachel Green. That had been the moment humanity stopped holding back. "All teams report ready," came Admiral Blake's voice through Nina's earpiece. He was coordinating the operation from orbit, watching everything through satellite feeds that the Kryn did not even know existed. "You are authorized to proceed. Bring our people home." Nina made a hand signal. Her team moved forward like shadows, covering the open ground between their position and the target building in less than 2 minutes. The Kryn guards at the entrance never saw them coming. Tranquilizer darts, not bullets. The guards dropped silently. The team breached the building through 3 entry points simultaneously. Nina's group took the main corridor while other teams secured the wings. Inside, they found the hostages locked in converted storage rooms, guarded by exhausted Kryn soldiers who had been on duty for 16 hours straight. Most of the guards surrendered immediately when they saw human weapons pointed at them. 2 tried to fight and were subdued with non-lethal force. Within 8 minutes of entry, Nina's team had secured all 73 hostages and was moving them toward the extraction point. "This is Team Alpha," Nina reported as they guided the confused and frightened hostages through the darkness. "We have packages secured. All alive. Requesting immediate evac." "Confirmed," Blake responded. "Transport ships arriving in 6 minutes." "Well done, Captain." Around the Kryn homeworld, similar reports came in from the other teams. 197 hostages recovered. 15 had died during the Kryn executions, but the rest were alive and would soon be safe. But the rescue operation was only part of what humanity was doing. High above the planet, Commander Vecthran watched his military infrastructure die. Human ships were targeting every military installation in Kryn space with devastating precision. Defense satellites, weapons platforms, ammunition depots, shipyards, communications arrays. Everything. What terrified Vecthran most was not the destruction itself, but the accuracy. The human ships were not carpet bombing. They were not destroying cities or civilian targets. Every single shot hit a military installation and only a military installation. Surgical strikes that required perfect intelligence. "How do they know where everything is?" his tactical officer asked, watching another weapons depot explode on the surface below. "Some of these installations are hidden. Secret. Even our own military high command does not know all their locations." Vecthran understood then. 47 years. Humanity had been in the galaxy for 47 years, being patient, being diplomatic, being everyone's mediator and peacekeeper. And the whole time they had been watching, learning, mapping, recording. Every time a Kryn ship visited a station where humans were present, they noted its design and capabilities. Every time Kryn officials met with human diplomats, those diplomats memorized details and filed reports. Every commercial satellite humanity launched included sensors that did more than advertise. Every scientific mission collected military intelligence alongside civilian data. For 47 years, humanity had been preparing for this exact scenario. They had just hoped they would never need to use it. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving another transmission from Ambassador Mitchell. She is broadcasting to the entire galaxy." Vecthran pulled up the feed on his command screen. Sarah Mitchell stood before the Galactic Council once more, but she looked different now. Harder. The diplomat's mask had fallen away, revealing something underneath that the galaxy had never seen before. "Members of the Council," Sarah began, her voice carrying to every species across known space. "You are watching the result of choices. The Kryn Dominion chose violence. They chose to murder innocent people. They chose to test humanity's patience and find its limits." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "For 47 years, humanity chose peace. We chose diplomacy. We chose to be the species that solved problems without violence. And many of you came to believe that meant we were incapable of violence. That our patience was weakness. That our restraint was fear." On the main screen behind her, footage played of the human fleet methodically dismantling Kryn military assets. Not randomly. Not angrily. With cold, calculated precision. "You were wrong," Sarah continued. "Patience is not weakness. Patience is a choice. We chose to wait, to watch, to learn. We chose to give every species the benefit of diplomacy before considering alternatives. But we also prepared. We planned. We made sure that if someone pushed too far, we would be ready." Vecthran felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans had not been weak. They had been waiting. And every moment of that waiting had made them more dangerous. "The Kryn Dominion has lost its military capability," Sarah stated flatly. "Every weapons platform, every military shipyard, every defense satellite has been destroyed. Their civilian infrastructure remains untouched. Their people are safe. But their ability to threaten anyone ever again is gone. This is what happens when you mistake our choice for our only option. She leaned forward slightly. Let this be a lesson to every species in the galaxy. Humanity prefers peace. We will always seek diplomatic solutions first. We will be patient, understanding, and willing to compromise. But if you force our hand, if you murder innocents and test our limits, you will discover that we are very, very good at war. We simply choose not to be. The transmission ended. Silence filled Vecthran's bridge. Around the Kryn homeworld, what remained of the Kryn military fleet drifted in space, damaged and defeated. 47 years of military buildup, gone in 4 days. Nina Foster and her team reached the extraction point with all their hostages. The transport ships descended through the night, engines glowing blue against the darkness. As the rescued humans and aliens boarded, many were crying, some from relief, others from trauma. One of the rescued humans, a young scientist named Tim Warren, looked at Nina with confusion. How did you find us? How did you know where we were? Nina smiled grimly as she helped him into the transport. We always knew where you were. We know where everything is. We have been watching this galaxy for 47 years. We just never had a reason to act on that knowledge until now. The transport lifted off, carrying its precious cargo toward the human fleet above. Behind them, Kryn military installations continued to burn. Not from hatred. Not from revenge. Simply from cold, calculated necessity. Humanity had been patient. Now the galaxy understood what that patience had been hiding. Not weakness. Not fear. But preparation. And the terrifying competence of a species that spent 47 years planning for the day when patience was no longer enough. Ambassador William Cooper walked through the Galactic Council station on his first day as humanity's chief representative, aware that every alien eye tracked his movement. He was younger than Sarah Mitchell had been when she retired, only 42 years old, but his gray eyes carried the same weight that hers had developed over decades. The whispers followed him through the corridors. Different species murmured to each other in their native languages, forgetting that human translator implants could pick up even quiet conversations. That is the new human ambassador. Do you think he is like Mitchell? Patient and calm? Or will he be like Blake? Cold and precise? William smiled slightly. Let them wonder. Let them worry. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson 6 months ago, and he intended to make sure they never forgot it. The Kryn Dominion had been reorganized under Galactic Council supervision. Commander Vecthran was no longer in command of anything. The Kryn military had been reduced to a small defense force, enough to protect their borders but not enough to threaten anyone else. War reparations were being paid to the families of those who had died. The surviving hostages had been returned, many traumatized but alive. And across the galaxy, something remarkable had happened. Territorial disputes that had dragged on for years suddenly resolved themselves within days. Trade disagreements that would have required months of human mediation were settled by the parties themselves in hours. Species that had been enemies for generations were finding compromises without any outside help. Nobody wanted humanity's attention anymore. Not the dangerous kind. William entered the council chamber and took his seat at the human delegation's platform. The chamber was unusually full today. 47 species had representatives present, more than had attended sessions in years. Everyone wanted to see the new human ambassador's first official act. The council speaker, a different Talarian than before, called the session to order. The council recognizes Ambassador William Cooper of Humanity, here to present his credentials and address this body. William stood and descended to the speaking floor, just as Sarah had done 6 months ago. He carried no notes, no prepared speech. He simply stood in the center of the circular chamber and looked around at the assembled delegates. My name is William Cooper, he began, his voice calm and conversational. I am honored to represent humanity before this council. My predecessor, Ambassador Sarah Mitchell, served you faithfully for 23 years. She mediated thousands of disputes. She prevented countless conflicts. She embodied humanity's commitment to peace and cooperation. Nods of agreement rippled through the chamber. Everyone remembered Sarah fondly even now. I intend to follow her example, William continued. Humanity still believes in diplomacy. We still prefer negotiation to violence. We still want to be your partners in building a peaceful galaxy where all species can thrive. The delegates relaxed visibly. This was what they wanted to hear. The humans were still the patient, helpful species they had always been. However, William added, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, I also want to be very clear about something. The events of 6 months ago were not an aberration. They were not a temporary loss of control. They were humanity showing you who we truly are when pushed beyond our limits. And those limits still exist. He paused, letting the words settle. We have rebuilt our diplomatic presence. We have returned to our role as mediators and peacekeepers. But we have not forgotten. And neither should you. Peace is our preference. It is not our only capability. The silence in the chamber was profound. For 3 weeks, William settled into his role. He mediated a mining dispute between the Salthene and a species called the Vortek. He helped negotiate a trade agreement between the Rothani and the Telarians. He smiled, he compromised, he found middle ground. He was everything the galaxy expected from a human diplomat. Then the Vrek Dominion made a mistake. A human colony ship, the New Brisbane, was traveling through neutral space toward a frontier world when Vrek military vessels intercepted it. 300 colonists, including 78 children, were detained. The Vrek claimed the colonists were trespassing through Vrek territory, despite the fact that the space had been neutral for 40 years. The Vrek demanded that humanity recognize their expanded territorial claims. In exchange, they would release the colonists unharmed after inspecting the ship for contraband weapons. William received the news in his office aboard the council station. His aide, a young diplomat named Sophie Harris, brought him the report with trembling hands. The Vrek have sent their demands to the council, Sophie said. They want a formal hearing to present their territorial claims. They estimate the process will take 3 to 4 weeks. William read the report carefully. 300 humans held by a species that was testing boundaries. The Vrek had watched what happened to the Kryn and apparently decided that their situation was different. They were not executing hostages. They were simply detaining them temporarily for inspection. Surely humanity would not overreact to such a minor incident. Sophie, William said calmly, please send a message to Admiral Blake. Ask him to move the Third Fleet to high alert status but maintain current positions. Then arrange an emergency council session for 2 hours from now. Sophie nodded and hurried out. William sat alone in his office looking at the photo on his desk. It showed Sarah Mitchell shaking hands with a Kryn official at a trade conference, 5 years before the hostage crisis. Both were smiling. Both believed peace was possible. Sarah had taught William everything he knew about diplomacy. She had also taught him the most important lesson of all. Know when to be patient and know when patience has run its course. 2 hours later, William stood before the assembled council. The Vrek delegate, a large male with bright blue scales, looked confident and relaxed. He clearly expected this to follow the standard pattern. Discussions, committees, negotiations. Ambassador Cooper, the Vrek delegate said, I am sure we can resolve this minor situation through proper diplomatic channels. The Vrek Dominion has no desire for conflict with humanity. William looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. My predecessor, Ambassador Sarah Mitchell, served the galaxy with patience and dedication for 23 years. She had decades of patience to give. I am 42 years old. I have, theoretically, 30 or more years of patience ahead of me. The Vrek delegate smiled, thinking this was agreement. But here is what you need to understand, William continued, his tone never changing. 6 months ago, the galaxy learned that humanity can spend decades of patience in 4 days if necessary. Ambassador Mitchell gave you 23 years. The Kryn Dominion forced her to spend all of it in less than a week. The smile faded from the Vrek delegate's face. I have decades of patience in me, William said softly. I would prefer to spend them slowly over many years, helping species cooperate and resolve differences peacefully. But if you force my hand, I can spend all of it very, very quickly. The question you need to ask yourself is this: do you want me to be patient or do you want me to be efficient? The chamber was absolutely silent. You have 2 hours to release every human on that colony ship, unharmed, and to issue a formal apology for this incident, William stated. If you comply, we will forget this ever happened and return to normal diplomatic relations. If you do not comply, I will spend the next 30 years of patience in the next 30 hours. And you will learn exactly what humanity is capable of when we stop being nice. The Vrek delegate's scales had gone pale. Around the chamber, other delegates watched with wide eyes. They remembered the Kryn. They remembered the precision. They remembered ships that never stopped coming. The Vrek delegate stammered. I will contact my government immediately. You have 2 hours, William repeated. He turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving stunned silence behind him. 90 minutes later, the New Brisbane reported that Vrek ships were departing and the colonists were free to continue their journey. A formal apology from the Vrek government arrived 30 minutes after that. William sat in his office and allowed himself a small smile. He picked up his personal communicator and sent a message to Sarah Mitchell, who was now retired on Earth. First crisis handled without firing a shot. I think I am getting the hang of this. Sarah's response came back 10 minutes later. That is what patience looks like when everyone knows what happens if it runs out. Well done, William. The galaxy is learning. And she was right. The galaxy had learned. Across dozens of star systems, species that might have tested human resolve thought better of it. Disputes were settled internally. Aggressive actions were reconsidered. Territory that might have been seized was left alone. Not because humanity was patrolling every corner of space. Not because human ships were threatening anyone. But because every species now understood a fundamental truth about humanity. Humans were persistence hunters. They evolved chasing prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. They could be patient for decades, watching and learning and preparing. But when pushed too far, they would pursue their objectives with tireless, relentless efficiency that no other species could match. The most dangerous hunter was not the one that struck first and hardest. It was the one patient enough to wait for the perfect moment, and persistent enough to never stop once the hunt began. Humanity preferred peace. But the galaxy now understood that preference was not limitation. It was choice. And every species treated that choice